In 1993, Nigeria witnessed its first freest and fairest election in the history of Nigeria, and I entered university during that year. Unfortunately, that election was annulled by the military junta in Nigeria, and that propelled me to be interested in politics in Nigeria. And then I became the student union president in Nigeria for my university at that time, and we fought the military dictatorship in Nigeria to a standstill. During that process, I was arrested many times. I was even threatened with expulsion letters so many times that my parents were very worried for me. But in the end, I managed. I graduated from the university. After my graduation, I wanted to be in politics, and I became a civil society leader. I was working with many civil society leaders in Nigeria. So many of them entered the Nigeria's democratic politics, and I saw that they became so corrupted very, very quickly. And that changed my mind because that democracy was not translating quickly into development dividends because so many Nigerians were living under the poverty line. And then I became interested in development itself because according to Abraham Lincoln, the former president of the United States of America, he said, democracy is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And I saw that Nigerians were not benefiting from the Nigeria's democracy. So I became interested in development. I went into international development studies at IDS, University of Sussex in the UK, did up to PhD, and I started working globally. And in my work, I realized one thing, that in many of these organizations, many of them concentrated a lot on policy making without actual development finance to fund development projects on the ground. I then joined a multilateral development bank called the African Development Bank. And in this African Development Bank, I joined because of the clarity of the incumbent president of the bank. And when I joined the bank, I was involved in many projects across the continent. Then, boom, we had a once-in-a-century crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. Imagine what would have happened in Africa if we had not responded adequately to that crisis. Again, you will all remember that in 1918, there was the Spanish flu that killed more than between 25 to 50 million people around the world. So we didn't want that to happen in Africa. Today, as you all know, more than 6 million people have died as a result of COVID-19 pandemic around the world. And in the United States of America, over 1 million people have died. Now, for us in Africa, only less than 174,000 people have died so far as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. You would ask yourself, what happened? How did that happen? One of the things that happened was our support. We deployed development finance very rapidly. Our board approved a 10 billion COVID-19 crisis response facility to stabilize African economies, but also to save lives and livelihoods. At the same time, we also launched a $3 billion COVID-19 social bond to alleviate the social and economic impacts of the pandemic in Africa. And I was at the center of all of these responses. And that really gave me a really good confidence that it's possible to deal with a crisis in a continent like Africa. Now, in terms of what we did, we helped many African countries to build their capacities to make sure that we ramp up support and we were able to deal with our borders in Africa to be able to control the speed through which the virus was transmitting. And today, we have a continent where we say we have recorded the lowest figures of casualties in terms of the crisis. Now, going forward, I think the quick question we should be asking ourselves is that should we continue to deploy development finance to both democracies and autocracies alike in Africa, especially looking at the fact that in the last few years, there have been some military dictatorships in some African countries. We've seen in Guinea, we've seen in Mali, we've also seen in places like Burkina Faso. So the question that we should be asking, imagine the future for Africa. How should we deploy development finance going forward? Today, I can tell you confidently that at the African Development Bank, we have been named the best multilateral financial institution in the world as a result of our response to COVID-19 pandemic. This year, we have also been named the most transparent institution in the whole of the world. So which means we have done something right that the rest of the world can emulate, can replicate all over the world. But the key question for us is, how do we combine democracy with development and the rule of law in terms of transparency? And that's one of the reasons why I have come to this particular program. And I hope we can provide some empirical analysis, some answers to this type of question. Again, thank you so much.